There's a story that Gouverneur Morris, who knew Washington very well, was dared to walk up to him and slap him on the back and say, "How are you doing?" and see what the reaction was. And then when he did it, he slapped him on the back, and Washington turned to him such a piercing glare of fury that Morris said, "I would never go through that again." It was almost horrifying to see how Washington viewed him. That's just a legend. But there is still a sense that Washington never let his hair down, so to speak, that he wouldn't joke. Actually, the truth is that Washington was very social. He was particularly social with ladies. He had an ability to relate to them as individuals and as human beings in their own way and based on their own interests. He never tried to talk down to them. He never tried to overwhelm them with his own interests, but he actually showed that he cared about what they were interested in. And so they kind of gravitated to him and enjoyed speaking with him simply on a social level. Of course, he was also very handsome, and he had a lot of other qualities that were attractive as well, but he also had a wonderful sense of humor. And yes, Washington maintained a great self-control. He was very careful not to say the wrong thing because he was conscious about how people looked at him and how they thought of him, and he knew that he had to be on his best behavior, that if he wasn't, that he could get in trouble simply because of how important he was. Nevertheless, when he was in social occasions with friends or with family, he was capable of joking as well as anybody else. Yes, he laughed. Yes, he enjoyed drinking wine, and sometimes he may even have had a little bit too much and become so jovial that he became almost wacky. But he wrote to a friend of his who was a French officer who was leaving for home after the Revolutionary War, and Washington reminisced about the great hilarity that a good bottle of claret always produces. So he certainly knew how to have fun. There was a wonderful episode in the Revolutionary War where Washington was having a party with his officers and with the officers' wives. And one of the women monopolized Washington during the dancing and just kept dancing and dancing and dancing with him. And that produced some jealousies and some anger because everybody wanted to have an opportunity to talk with him. And so those jealousies simmered, and at the end of the dancing and the eating and some of the drinking, they decided to separate, as they often did in those days. The women would go into one room and the men would stay in another room. Except on this occasion, the women kidnapped one of the officers and carried him off with them into the other room. Washington then decides, well, it's up to me to lead a raiding party to release this officer from captivity. So he gets the men together and they charge into the room and they try to grab this officer and drag him out, and the women are having none of it, so they actually hold on to the other side and they begin grappling with each other. So at some point in the melee that follows, Washington finds himself grappling with one woman who had been jealous of him before, and she just screams at him and he says, "Let go of me or I'll scratch your eyes out or tear your hair out." And she ends up with saying in a huff, "You may be a general, but you're just a man." And you can imagine how flabbergasted Washington is. No, he doesn't take her and hurl her to the floor. No, he doesn't turn bright red and start trembling, but he probably laughs awkwardly and says, "Okay," and he goes with the rest of the men back into the other room, and they leave the captured officer in captivity. Well, in the days, weeks, and months following this, gossip begins spreading about what actually happened in this tussle. And the women start talking with each other, and they start arguing, and some of the women say that this woman who had yelled at Washington had created a scene, and it was despicable and unacceptable, and they start sending these letters back and forth, and they become very angry. And then finally, they write to Washington and they say, well, can you put on record what exactly happened? And Washington, probably with some degree of discretion, says, I'm not getting involved. But he has one of his aides de camp write back to the women and convey his sense that it was all in good fun and not to worry about it. I didn't take it seriously. So this really happened, and very few people know about it. And this shows that, as the old adage goes, truth is stranger than fiction. Do we really need some of those legends about Washington and the supposed love affairs that he had, or the supposedly strange things that he did, when we can actually just look at what actually happened and see that, hey, he was a guy you might like to sit down and have a beer with?